The stage is all yours. Please lead us.
Thank you, Moria. Thank you for setting that up, and thank you for the presenters that set this up, talking about stories and storytelling in business. And we're going to shift gears today and talk about story thinking. Let me share my screens. Okay. So it's an introduction to story thinking. I'm going to hit a lot of topics at a high level today, so I'm going to move pretty quickly. And the key thing about story thinking is that you can think of it like this. Storytelling is using story as a communication strategy, and story thinking is using story as an operational strategy. Okay, that's the key difference, and we'll go into that in some examples as we go through. And the topics for today: the need for story thinking, concepts behind story thinking, some comparisons to other models, applications, and we'll specifically look at KM applications, and a short conclusion. All right, let's jump right in. Information anxiety is something that came about around 1989s, and there's a book written about it because of the amount of information that became available. And people thought that information anxiety was due to the amount of information that was available. But the author of the book of this title said it's something different. It's about the gap between what we understand and what we think we should understand. And as Einstein said, any fool can know. The point is to understand. How do we understand? As we have gained knowledge from neuroscience about the importance of story and books written about the fact that we're wired for story, we say that we think in story. We think in story. Sounds like story thinking. It's hardwired in our brain. It's how we make a strategic sense of the otherwise overwhelming world around us. So the question is the sense-making pattern for stories just for how we should talk? Or is it also for how we should think and learn and work? We look at storytelling as being very powerful and helpful to us, looking at the past, historical context. We learn from that, lessons learned. And as we look to the future, giving us visioning, strategy, bringing people into our vision. And what would be helpful is in the present, as we work in the present, is to use story to create our working models and our learning models. Carl Jung said, you are in a story, whether you know it or not. And a while back, I was trying to get my head around his quote, and I asked myself this question. I'd like you to ask yourself the same question. Next year, will I be able to tell a story about this year, about some things that I learned, some opportunities missed, some development, and some accomplishments, and some changes maybe in the way that I'm thinking about things? And when I realized what the answer was to that question, a couple things hit me. One was Carl Jung was right again. And two, I thought, how powerful would it be if we actually understood what he's saying and what neuroscience is saying? If we actually understood this year what it means that we're in a story so that we can affect the outcome of what we will tell next year. Because what we do now is operate within prescriptive models that came out of the Second Industrial Revolution. Do these things in this order. We're not sure exactly why. So some of us are certified in Plan, Do, Check, Act, and others are certified in Define, Measure, Analyze, Improve, Control, and so forth. So we memorize these steps. And then when things aren't working, what do? We have a conversation, we have a meeting, and we talk through it, hopefully, and structure a story, some sense making. And then we go back to work following some steps that we were given. So one day I thought, I have an idea. Why don't we bring story with us back into the work environment so we operate from the sense-making pattern of story? So that's story thinking. Some people always resist change. Van Gogh said, do not quench your inspiration and your imagination. Do not become the slave of your model. I think in KM and other domains, we're still doing the same thing we've done because we were taught that a few decades ago. We've become the slave of our model, and we're not even sure what the model was. We just know the steps now.
Mm.
And it takes some level of disruption, in any case, to move us out of our memorized steps and adopt another model. And I think that day is here. And it's called the Fourth Industrial Revolution. If you're not familiar with this term, the first revolution was based on steam and mechanical production, completely changed the way that we thought about operations, work, and the organization and what's possible and the human element in that organization. The second revolution was based on electricity and assembly lines. So majority of the workforce then became focused on routines and memorization. The third revolution was based on computing and online workflow. Most of us are familiar with what that means. What's here now is the fourth revolution based on intelligence itself, and digital connectivity. So a majority of the workforce will be into sense making and understanding. That's going to require more than just retraining. So we're going to hear people say, look, we've been through revolutions before. We'll just retrain people. There'll be new types of jobs we'll retrain them for. But think about it this way. In the past, we would take the guy who was trained to put shoes on a horse, and we would retrain him to put fenders on a bumper or on a car, or a bumper on a car as it comes through the factory line. That's retraining. What we're talking about as intelligence becomes the foundation of what happens in the organization. We're talking about a whole nother level. And I do believe that KMers are going to be very involved in making sure that this works correctly. So with that, let's look at some concepts of story thinking. The story structure itself was probably originally given to us by Joseph Campbell's research. That shaped George Lucas's idea of story in his Star Wars saga. It's a pretty successful idea called the hero's journey. And it starts with the idea of a status quo. Just tell me what you were doing when you're minding your own business, and that was your routine before something happened. He calls call to adventure, either because out of boredom or the house burned down, you have to go. Something has happened in these movies, and we understand why they've been moved out of their status quo. And then as they consider their options, they consider an option so big that they realize, maybe I'm not the right person. I don't know if I can do this. A refusal of the call is an important part of the story, because if it's a hero's journey, you realize at some point that you have a very big obstacle to overcome. But at some point, we reach assistance. Let's think of this course as the assistance, as we're all heroes in our journey. And then there's a point he called crossing the threshold, moving towards trials, one trial after another, approach something we know that's coming, that he called the ordeal, the big thing that we know we have to face. And having faced it, we win, we accomplish. There's a reward, because it's called the hero's journey, not the loser's journey. But it's not over. The story's not over. Maybe we were just lucky that one time. There's a few more steps, some things that happen, our confidence, realizing that something's different about us, not just our environment, a new life, and we return transformed. So this basic idea is what we want to build off of. And the question for us today is, if this is the idea of story, where are you? You are here somewhere. Every conversation, decision, transaction, and project happens somewhere in this cycle. Now, some trips around the cycle take a moment as you think it through, or a project, or even a lifetime. One of the ways you can think about where you are is, are you stuck somewhere? Okay, are you in disruption still? Then we're just blustering. Or investigating, you're still investigating, you're looking into it, then you're just in analysis paralysis. Or idea, here's another idea, I'm not sure which one to go with. We're dithering. Maybe you're stuck in trying to put something together and you're languishing. Or it's okay, it's almost okay, it's there, but we want it even better. We're stuck at perfectionism. Or maybe we're stuck just doing the same old thing in our routine, unchallenged. Maybe another way to think about where you are is based on emotions. We all know that there's a laundry list of positive and negative emotions, but there's very specific terms that we use depending on where we are in the story. A problem is that emotional awareness is usually presented and taught to us in isolation of cognition. How are you feeling? I'm sad. Well, be happy. It's a little more involved with that. You can think of it like a map. If you're at the mall or a theme park, you are here. Indications of where you are, and that provides empathy, allows us to think about how to move you forward and where you've gotten stuck in your story. So, as we think about moving this story idea into the work environment, this is what it would sound like. And I'm sure you've actually said something like this. We had successful operations at work, but we knew more competition was coming. We discovered a new idea that we could incorporate and created a new vision. Development took some time. Maybe it took some more time. But it all came together. We tested it and rolled it out. Now operations are even better. So we get this idea of automation. Sometimes we use the term automation as if it means mechanical automation. The root term means mindless thought, not mindful thought. And it turns out that people are very good at automation as well. And it's at the bottom of this representation because it takes energy to move up and out of our routine to finally say, okay, we're not going to do this anymore. Let's go up and figure out a whole new way and bring that pattern back into a routine. So underlying this cycle where there's 6 things and people might ask, maybe there's 7, are some mindsets that actually drive or produce these phases of the story. And you've probably heard this, that it either works or it doesn't work. Those are workability beliefs. And there's a third one called could work. That's where most projects spend most of their time. You've also noticed what's at the end of sentences across languages. There's a question mark and a period and an exclamation point. And so important that in Spanish, they'll tell you at the beginning of the sentence with an upside down question mark, we're in this mode. And as you bring those two ideas together, you start to see that when we say automation, what we're saying is that we're in a mindset of does work reactive. Or at the top, when we're in ideation, we're in a mindset of could work and questioning. So there's a couple of academic papers and conferences that this has gone through for the last decade. And this is where I started presenting this. And the feedback that I've gotten all along my journey is that I didn't generalize even broadly enough, that there's more and more examples of what this explains beyond the few business models that I started with, including the scientific method, how policy making happens, and one business and change model after another. So we'll take a look at that list in a little while, up to 30 now. One of the big differences between storytelling and story thinking is that storytelling usually goes through the entire cycle, but we can navigate on this, think of it as a map, differently as we're operating with it. And the two primary navigation paths start with one, the full cycle, which is the whole, what you're used to as a story. And that's for meaningful learning, projects and transformational change, innovation and creativity, R&D departments, research and development. Halfway through the story, though, we determine this is what we're going to call it. This is what it is. Let's just memorize it and get it out there and function from it. This is called the half pipe. I call it the half pipe because if you've ever seen snowboarding, that's what they call the bottom half of a cycle. It's the half pipe. What's it for? It's for rote learning, routines and transactional change, execution and compliance operations departments. And what's the relationship between these two navigation paths? They're not two separate systems. We've known about this in psychology for some time. We call it thinking slow or thinking fast. System 1, system 2. And the question's always been, how do you get from one to the other? And what story thinking shows us now for the first time is that they're not two separate systems. One is a subset of the other, and the larger is the structure of story. The problem is we tend to get stuck in the half pipe. It's like gravity, individually and culturally. In our organizations, this is the way we've done it. This is just our reactive nature now. It takes energy or something big enough to disrupt us to say, okay, that's it. I tried rebooting. I tried doing this. I'm going to get another computer. Whatever it is, to go look into it and come up with something else and put a new routine into place. Maybe you've heard the story about two entrepreneurs where they needed to get water to a town. One of them started carrying buckets of water, jumped right into the project right away, got some buckets, started making money, bringing water back from a long distance that he had to go to bring it back to the town. The other entrepreneur said, I work on it, and no one saw him for a while. We thought he was gone, didn't know what he was doing, probably wasn't thinking about his job. But one day he returned and he had a pipe that he had been putting into place and the water just flowed. He was thinking about it differently. So it's a question for us in our operational stages. We use story as an operational strategy. What state that we think we're getting stuck in. So Thomas Kuhn looked at the same type of thing as he wrote The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. We can trust what we were told, what we confirmed, and now we'll just believe that. We'll practice it, react. Okay, something's not working, try rebooting. We'll go back and practice it. And at some point, it begins not to work. And we have a crisis moment. We have to start to unlearn. We know why it's called revolution now. Look into it, come up with a new model or paradigm, he called it. It's a paradigm shift. We'll change the model we're operating from, put some faith into that, try to roll it out. Maybe first with a prototype, a pilot. Okay, so we're going back and forth, and finally we take a plunge, and we're using affirmation not just to confirm now, but just to affirm. We'll just look up the answer. Start to preserve it with maintenance. This is how we keep it going. After a while, the maintenance of the idea is lost, and we're back in the same cycle. Now, he was describing what happened to the fundamental models that we were thinking of, what science would use when we thought of planetary motion. What happened with Copernicus when Newton came along? What happened to Newton's ideas when Einstein came along and changed the models? And that these revolutions happen every couple hundred years. Now we're seeing that this looks like a product life cycle. This is what happens with the expectation that we now have of a new iPhone model every year, thinking that and expecting that the capabilities that we're operating from should change annually is why it feels like the rate of change has increased in our lifetime. This is still the same model that he was describing, and it is a structure of story. Okay, you know enough now to be dangerous. Let's put it into action. When we think about using story, so most email capabilities let you provide some colors to some email that's coming in. If you flag something as important with a flag, also try going ahead and adding a color to it as a category. Do you think that it's green? Is it basically operational status, or red, an issue, complaint, maybe a hot topic or an opportunity? Maybe it's purple, you're looking into it, research progress, or yellow, it's an idea, possibility, or connection. Maybe flag it as orange. It's progress or milestone, or blue. It's an answer, source, or test method. To think about applying this to your work starting today. Let's look at some comparisons of other models, other change models, to the idea of story as a change model. This is actually in the appendix of the book, and there's more than 30 now. This list continues to grow as people ask me about one or another models that they're interested in. If you have a chance, go ahead and chat now. I would love to go back. I tried to do this with my audiences and look at in chat. If you wouldn't mind typing the number of the model that you're the most familiar with, or you like the most, or you're certified in, or that resonates with you. Just go ahead and chat and put the number in that is the model that you think of when you think of change, or that you use the most, or that you like the most. These are usually prescriptive models. We've been given these models, do these things in this order. Sometimes we don't know why. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. So we're going to compare them to story structure. And let's start with this one. If you're certified in project management, you know what these terms are. You've memorized them: initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, controlling, closing. We know those. We can memorize them. It's on a test. What does it mean? Why does it seem to work? As we map those things to do against the map of structure, or the structure of story, then we can see that it sort of makes sense. This is why we do these things. Or we're drawn to design thinking. Why? What is it about design thinking that people are drawn to? It makes sense when you map the steps against the map of story structure. Then it makes sense why we're doing those things, including the very first step in this case that brings in the emotional aspect of problem solving, identifying a problem, because it's looking at empathizing. Well, I'm just trying to do this routine, and these are the things that keep happening. Okay, let's not just write down the problems. Let's actually empathize. Let's capture all of it, and then define, ideate, prototype, test, and implement something new that solves for it. That's why this is something we're drawn to. And agile methodology. This agile means it's not waterfall. It's not linear. You get to put two arrows on it. That's fundamentally all that agile really means. Then we start developing, we'll test that and go back and develop something else. Maybe go back and redesign a piece and then go forward with that as we move through the story structure. So these are somewhat direct alignments and make sense in the workplace as we try to use story as an operational strategy. Here's some that I call indirect. Six Sigma uses a thinking model called DMAIC, which is define, measure, analyze, improve, control. And if you're certified in this, as I am, you will know that most of the training is in step 3, analyze, a lot of statistical root cause analysis. To do what? To determine why something is different. The whole point of this, as it came out of manufacturing, is to control a manufacturing environment, that everything that comes out of the factory is virtually the same. And it doesn't really give you a lot of ideas around improve, just come up with something new. But the point is to get back into a routine that punches out the same things. So this has been used even in innovation environments, and it was thrown out because it was actually working against innovation. They weren't sure why, but now we know why, because we're asking the wrong questions. Let's take a look at an innovation model. This is known as a simple model. Basically, start with the idea: be bold. Let's take on a big challenge, and instead of reinventing the wheel, let's look at what's out there. Seek the available. Investigation is in asking what went wrong, and then repurpose. So some people might have said, okay, let's look at something that's a big problem in a lot of places, which is transportation. All right, what's available? I do see cars, and some of those people have cell phones. Let's repurpose that and create an app. And if we had thought of this, we could have invented Uber. That's all it is. It's moving through a story, asking different questions to land us in a different place so that we can tell a different story next year. And here's an indirect alignment that is basically what I call half-pipe education. It's mainly the way that we think of education. Here's the learning objectives. At the end of this, you will do these things and know these things because I'll tell you what they are, and we'll see how fast you can remember them. Halfway through the story, after we figure out what the problems are and different ways to solve for it and the trade-offs that we're going to take towards it, we start at that point and say, now you memorize this. This is education. This is not going to work for us in the fourth industrial revolution. The robots will eat our lunch. So there's some key differences in the way that we educate now, focused on Bloom's taxonomy, starting with the core requirement as a base to remember. We don't need to do that when I can say, hey, Siri, and I can get an answer. And we can move towards writing learning objectives and measuring them at specific places in the story. That's what the story thinking objective approach is all about. The key difference is education, when you think about it, is now based on evaluation models, not learning models. And Bloom admits in his first book that the approach that he's taking of making evaluation easier for evaluators, that's what the book was about, could create fragmentations in learning, was his term. Fragment means there's an underlying structure. Today, we understand that that mental structure being fragmented is the structure of story. What about healthcare? As you look at on the left, SOAP notes. If you're in healthcare, if you have been in through any training as a doctor, nurse, or anything like that, you will know about SOAP and SOAP steps. This is what the mental model is that we're taught. Subjective, I walk in and say, my knee hurts. Objective, they write down, well, he was limping. Assessment, let's do an x-ray plan. Here's what we're going to do. That's the end of the official mental model of healthcare, versus the clinical process model that was based on story thinking. And let's look at the difference. Healthcare workers are currently trained to work from an incomplete mental model. The KM and documentation systems operate from this incomplete mental model. That means limited AI. In other words, if the systems were built from a complete mental model and you're about to give someone a blood type that's different in treatment than you identified an assessment for their blood type, lights would light up on the screen. Something would give the doctors as I call it, a smarter cockpit. If you're a pilot, you want a smarter cockpit. We don't do that because we're operating from an incomplete mental model. Did you know actually a leading cause of death in the US is due to medical error? So why is that? We're operating from an incomplete mental model. And this is another example of the importance of bringing story into how we operate, how we work, not just how we talk. Okay, one more. How about a change model? So here's an important change model from Cotter, and it's successful from the standpoint of already knowing that I want to push a change out, versus story thinking based on looking at best practices called I led them. Okay, I led them. It's based on the first letter of each of the steps, starting with one, identify opportunities, not problems. Look into gap analyses. There's more than one type of analysis. Envision, develop solution, evaluate trueness, what you'll accept as true. And then the importance also of maintaining status quo. That's where proficiency is, while keeping our eye out for more opportunities. So key differences. We get stuck on step one when it's forcing a change instead of asking if there's a positive case for change. Completely different approaches to step one. Most steps focus on social support instead of appreciative inquiry. And I let them incorporates best practices from all change models operating off a story structure. The key one being that step one is where people get stuck. And it's because they think that
John,
it's
before you
disrupting.
continue,
Yep.
we have a question 2 minutes back. I just waited for you to finish the
Okay.
slide. It's a rather long one. This is an interesting model of revolutionary thinking to discuss. Sometimes disruption is only noticed by the board member of company's management, thus investigated it themselves, provide the idea of innovation, but then fail to encourage the whole members to improve the final expectation through formation and automation, because the employees feel that they are not being engaged from the start of the problem, or because the problem do not experienced and struggled by the employees feels like it is only the board's interest. On the other hand, too much opinion could not determine the right priorities of the disruption itself. My question, Emmanuel's question, if I may say, how should we engage the employees, and on what stage should we include them and include the whole all members for the new thinking? Thanks.
Okay. Fabulous question. Let's hold on to that question for about 6 or 7 slides because I hit it directly and we can see it if you won't mind. So, but great question related specifically to change management, and I hit that directly. So right now, I just want to focus on this idea that one of our problems is at step one that we think disruption is a synonym for problem. This was a meme that was going around. People said this was the greatest ad of 2020 because here's an organization that thought of disruption as opportunity. People get stuck on step one is something we have to consider in our change process. Here's a true story about getting unstuck, literally. The right front wheel stopped working on the Mars rover Spirit. NASA could not solve the problem. They tried and tried, couldn't solve it. So then they asked a different question. What's still working? They could drive the rover backwards. When the stuck wheel dragging behind, it pushed away the top layer of Martian soil to reveal a new discovery, salt, which meant there was once water on Mars. Appreciative inquiry is not just the way to think about asking questions. It has to be built into the change models themselves. It's built into the story thinking model for change for that reason. Okay, some quick quotes For an organization in the knowledge economy, the ability to learn faster than your competitors may be the only sustainable competitive advantage. So he was talking about this idea of taking everything we know about learning, and I don't mean memorizing and procedural steps, but learning as in story thinking. And instead of applying that to our current products, making it our core competency, a learning organization knows what learning is as its core competency. So as change comes along, we can actually adapt with new products and services. There was once a company that made film and cameras that used film called Kodak that had an early view of a digital camera and didn't know what to do with it because it wasn't film. They could have led everyone in the digital transformation, but instead they filed bankruptcy. Why? They operated on the left-hand side and not the right-hand side. Deming himself said, "We will never transform the prevailing system of management without transforming our prevailing system of education. They are the same system." Do you know the name of that system? It's story. Let's look at some applications within KM for story thinking. Here's a fabulous piece of work, KM ISO 3401, around the things that KMers need to do, and was done brilliantly, is to stay away from saying that it must be done these particular ways. But if I were to think about strategically how I would approach it, if I wanted to bring story thinking into how I would do these things, let me back up. So this is how it's been mapped. There's many pieces of it that's been mapped back to story thinking. And today we're going to look at a handful. Sorry if you're colorblind, but there's a handful that are in blue: 4.4 KM systems, 4.5 organizational or culture, and then leadership, change management. That's when I'll hit that question, and KPIs real quickly. So just to give you an idea across the board of a few examples of how to think about what KMers do through the lens now of story thinking. So when I think about KM systems, people will talk about a KM system, and I ask them, what do you mean by a KM system? Generally, what they're talking about is an answer system. This is what we've determined as the answer. Could be an FAQ page, could be a smart search engine, or even a bot. This is the answer that we have formulated. But before that became the answer, there were probably competing ideas in the organization. Let's put it that way. Were they captured just in email, or do you have actually an ideation system? Or maybe you don't have a discovery system. Maybe if you had a discovery system in your organization, looking at big data and coming up with patterns that humans weren't recognizing, that would help you move and learn faster as an organization. So you can think of this like a tire. It needs to keep moving. And if you're missing something, that's a flat part of the tire where you're always going to slow down. So when I think about KM systems, I ask, what system are you talking about? A risk decision system, a dashboard of what's working operationally? And which one are you missing if you want to learn faster than your competition so that you're constantly moving through a story? Same type of idea, really, when you talk about culture. You want to have all the pieces in place. This is a true story. Maybe you didn't know this, but it was Xerox that invented the first PC with a mouse and GUI, graphical user interface. Before that, you had to memorize commands. And if you remember typing in dir just to see your file names. So that idea was picked up by Steve Jobs, actually. He visited their lab, and then Apple launched the Lisa and the Macintosh. But the idea of mouse did not become the norm in how we work with computers until Microsoft made it that way with the GUI and made it the industry norm. What we're looking at are cultures of pure research, applied research, and operational platform thinking. And someone wrote a book saying, Fumbling the Future, how Xerox really messed it up. I don't know if that's true or not. I think that there are a bunch of PhDs looking at the psychology of memorization versus selecting and working off of that. That's okay. Just know what your culture is and team with other people that build apps or whatever, if you're an ideation. Or if you're an operational platform, than work with people that just come up with ideas but don't know how to run a business. So you don't have to be good at everything. This is one of the core concepts in the leadership coaching work now that I do applied to story thinking, is that we think we're supposed to do everything and be good at everything, or someone will write a book about us that we're fumbling the future. Well, one interesting aspect on this story, Xerox's first mouse had 3 buttons. Apple came out with a mouse with 1 button, and Microsoft came out with 2 buttons. Okay, to the topic of leadership. Start with this idea. Leadership Quarterly is where people turn to look at the research in this area. They put out a summary, 25 years of research and theory of what we call leadership and leadership development. And at the end of all of that, they said something that's kind of hard to say 3 times fast. Present practices are primitive. What we tend to do is look at some profiles and study, okay, maybe I'm this or that, and opposite spectrums. I'm an introvert, you're an extrovert. That's interesting. Is that leading change? It's an aspect to it. Is that the foundation of leading change? There's a lot of profiles. Just go to Facebook. How important are they as they relate directly to leading change? And what is change? It's a story structure. So the new profiles are based on this transformational change, based on story thinking. Oh, yes, leaders need to have vision and patience, integrity, composure, boldness, resilience. It's a laundry list, just like emotions. But where in the story is it most important for them to authentically bring out that capability as a leader? And where are they getting stuck? One of the things I find is that leadership tends to focus on composure, even when the building's on fire. We want to hear boldness at that point, that they recognize it, that they recognize we're in disruption and going to do something about it. So there's a lot of misalignments around the old way of thinking about leadership. This is actually in production now, 32-page report helping leaders lead change based on story thinking. Okay, here is the answer. I think to your question, let me know. This is currently how we work on change management. It's kind of focused on the rollout. So there are people that we train them to do what they're doing. They're in routine, in automation, and then we come in and say, we're gonna bring something else in. So here's how you're gonna do this now. And first off, we want to find any people that are resisting change. Any change resistors? Let's identify them and put them on a list. This is not good change management. It's telling them this is the change that's coming. Of course, there's resistance when we try to do it this way. But good change management recognizes where people are. If you're thinking as the leadership or the board, as you say, way out there, that's what you should be doing. You should be thinking out there. That's what makes you a leader. You've been leading the thinking in change. And when you've gotten so far out there with the ideas of where you want to take people, here's what you need to do. Back your train all the way back up and connect to the cars where they are. Because people are doing what they think works because you train them on it. So start there. Go, yeah, this is what we were trained to. This is working. It works, but at what cost? So start to help them move across the line and recognize disruption with what they're doing. It works, but for how many people? For how long? And have we considered the competition coming? You start to have them move mentally into disruption that maybe what we're doing won't work constantly by next year. Okay, well, here's some things we looked into and some ideas that we have as a leadership team, as the board. Now that we're showing you, what do you think? Because you're doing the job now and you know what needs to happen. Okay, that's a great idea. Let's add that idea to our list. So we kind of get this, and we're always told, engage people, let them be part of the project. It's too broad of a statement. It doesn't tell us exactly what we mean by that. We need to know what engagement means as it relates to each specific phase and crossing the lines between phases as we're moving through story structure. And please, I'll stop here. Please tell me if that's the question that you wanted me to address here.
Emmanuel, you may speak up.
Great, John. Thank you for the answer. I think it's covered because, we should always questioning. We engage them. Sometimes we we no need to push them to thinking hard, but just asking them a question, it's already to engage them or make them unfreeze with their normal condition. Yeah, thank you for the answer.
Great, great. Thank you. And thank you for the question. Okay. So let's move into another quick one. Just in 9.1, just the idea of evaluation. What are we evaluating? So if we're evaluating sort of culture or just an organization snapshot through the lens of story thinking, there are very specific things that we would want to look for. And again, the same idea. If there's one that's really small or very low, that's an indication of a place that this tire that needs to move has a flat spot. And it gives us a place to think about prioritization of what to work on, because people will talk about their core values and their processes, and that's fantastic. They're very productive. Yep, we're very busy doing something. But what about the rest of these things that can be a place where culturally the organization is not going to be able to learn faster than their competitors, as they say, because they're missing something culturally? Okay, so that takes us to a quick conclusion, and we'll still have time after this to have you in a breakout group. The conclusion is storytelling is communication strategy using story. Story thinking is an operational strategy using story. I love storytelling. I think that it's not being used enough. The power of being wired for story is more than just how to talk. It's for how to work and learn, to build it into our working and learning models. So a lot of takeaways today. Here's 3 that I want to make sure that you've got. You don't have to memorize dozens of models and frameworks. All roads lead to story. Okay, there's going to be subsets and variations, but think about it from a sense-making standpoint. It should align with story. Most of us use the knowledge representation and visualization of process and hierarchy as our mental models. As I say, it's not what you think that's important. It's what you think from that's more important. We think from process when we're asking, okay, what happens next? Who's in charge? The hierarchy. We're thinking from those structures, and we need to add story as a structure to our mental model as well. And lastly, don't get stopped at step 1. Disruption is a problem and an opportunity. Look for the opportunities. There's a dopamine effect. There's a way to bring people into disruption rather than make them shy away from it. Marketing people have known this for a long time. Today, only half price. Okay. One last quick quote. This is from a book review. They said, Lewis poses the tantalizing proposition that poor results in education, innovation, and policymaking are rooted in a breakdown between the rational mind and the fundamental models that govern institutions. And they were able to summarize my work better than I did. So I just think this review is fabulous. Okay, now you want to know my story? As a young boy, I went to the World's Fair, and the theme was peace through understanding. I didn't know what theme meant, but I know this big sign was there, and it was on every cup and napkin. It left an impression. As a teenager, I learned how to fly airplanes and how to read aviation maps and infer directions. Key term here, inference between prescriptive and descriptive knowledge. I didn't call it that yet. One of my favorite jobs was launching and flying GPS satellites, bringing You Are Here to the world before most people ever heard of GPS. And my doctoral dissertation was on mental models, but I kept researching to find the meta model that produces understanding. And I wrote Story Thinking because neuroscience shows we're wired for stories. Now we can see You Are Here within that map of story that does bring understanding. So I added to my list of quotations. This one says, without a map, we are lost in geography and epistemology. And the map is story. With that, thank you very much for your attention today. Please join me on LinkedIn and a brand new website I've been asked to put together, which is storythinkingleadership.com. I'll be adding more content there. But we do have time today for a breakout, and Maury, I'll need your help on this.
Anat, can you please open our breakout rooms? And you see here, Anat already shared with us the link for today's breakout room for the slides. And Anat, please divide us into 10 groups, 10 teams, 10 rooms. Here we go. Just a half a minute. Here we are. Please join. We'll call you back for the last 1-2 minutes for ending notes.
Get later.
Okay. In a few seconds, everyone will be with us. John? We've lost John. Here they all come. John,
We're
I
back.
understand you were in one of the rooms, so you didn't have a chance in looking through all of them. But if looking at the slides, you want to say a few ending notes, we'll appreciate it.
Yeah, we got into a great discussion actually, and I haven't had a chance if you want to bring up a couple of the key ones that you saw. I haven't made it over to Google. We were in another discussion. So if you have a key one that you would like to bring up, let me know.
I think that everyone is very, even if they have many ideas, it takes time to organize them.
Okay.
And we are now ending our time, so we will all go back and pop into these discussion rooms. We have the link and see what we can learn. And if you have additional thoughts regarding, please share it with us on the WhatsApp or in any other place. On behalf of all of us, thank you. I think that it's a great idea, a great model, and it can serve us for several different usages, give us another perspective on our work, on our learning, and on our KM. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
John. Thank you, Moria.
Thank you. Bye.